If there was ever a time that Donald Trump needed to zip it, it is right now. Because no matter what he does or threatens, we are not going to reelect him. Donald Trump is a failing, flailing lame duck. His approval numbers are dropping through the floor. There is now a battle between the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans, and it looks like the Senate Republicans are peeling off. Now, things are going to require our efforts and our attention. We cannot get complacent. As I've always said, it's going to get worse before it gets worse. But he is not here forever if we want him to go. Now, first, let's talk about why he needs to zip it, right? And let's just start with how it started. As you may have heard, yesterday, Donald Trump made a series of death threats against military veterans who are in the House and Senate Democrats. Period. There is no way to slice or dice this any other way. He made these death threats to bring assassination attempts against him. It is a fact from the same leadership, Donald Trump and the Republicans, who were blaming Democrats for the murder of Charlie Kirk, claiming that criticizing Republicans or criticizing Charlie Kirk led to this lone guy in Utah who killed him, right? Okay, there is no evidence of that. And first of all, these are the people, Donald Trump is the person, if you remember, who is encouraging his followers to hang Mike Pence. Donald Trump has a history of wishing death and murder on his opponents and laughing if they or their family members are harmed. Remember what he did after Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's husband, was violently and brutally attacked in his home. I won't forget that, right? He blamed him. He laughed at him. This is who they are. This is the guy who, when members of the legislature in Minnesota were shot and one of them murdered with her husband and the other hospitalized for a long time, did not call or eat to them to express his concern or even condemn political violence or even talk about it. So let me give you that context. Now, let's back up. How this started, what inspired Donald Trump to make these death threats? Well, it was what he perceives as insubordination. This was a video put out by members of the House and Senate who are veterans, who are extremely concerned about the murders that are being ordered by Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, against people on boats in the Caribbean. These are not justifiable under our law or probably international law. And they are trying to remind people that you, in the military, that you are legally obligated to ignore and not follow unlawful orders. And this is really important because remember, the head of the Southern Command resigned before these continuous killings went forward. So let me start with that video. This is, again, a message that includes my Senator Alyssa Slotkin and others. Let's watch this.
I'm Senator Alyssa Slotkin.
Senator Mark Kelly.
Representative Chris DeLuzio.
Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander.
Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
Congressman Jason Crow.
I was a captain in the United States Navy.
Former CIA officer.
Former Navy.
Former paratrooper and Army Ranger.
Former intelligence officer.
Former Air Force.
We want to speak directly to members of the military
And the intelligence community.
Who take risks each day
To keep Americans safe.
We know you are under enormous stress and pressure right now.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military,
And intelligence community professionals.
against American citizens.
like us. You all swore an oath.
To protect and defend this Constitution.
And right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad.
But from right here at home.
Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law.
Or our Constitution.
We know this is hard.
And that it's a difficult time to be a public servant.
But whether you're serving in the CIA,
In the Army,
Our Navy,
The Air Force.
Your vigilance is critical.
and know that we have your back.
because now, more than ever,
The American people need you.
We need you to stand up for our laws.
our Constitution,
And who we are as Americans. Don't give up.
don't give up.
don't give up.
Don't give up the ship.
I have the chills. That is extremely powerful to hear from. I think it was 6 of these veterans. And think about what it meant for them to come together and air this commercial so it would get to the millions of people who needed to see it in our armed forces. Now, I just want to see how many people we have. 1.3 million active duty personnel and around another 700,000 reserves. So close to 2 million people were the audience for that message. That's how it started. And Donald Trump basically lost his cool, if he ever had a cool. And this is what went up first on his Truth Social. Let me show you this. Seditious behavior punishable by death. Okay. We will look at the law on this in a moment. This is not my area of law, but let's just hold on to the thought of this. He is saying, let's just look at it on the face. He's claiming what they did is illegal. Telling the public telling members of the military, whether it's telling 1.3 million active duty members of the military that they don't have an obligation to follow an unlawful order. In fact, they must not follow an unlawful order, is literally stating the law. And in fact, it is echoing one of the most important lessons we learned in World War II, right? After World War II, when Nazis and the Nazis who were participating in the murder of millions of Jewish people and others said, well, we were just following orders. And this is what they told themselves at the time. Like, it's not me, it's above my pay grade to make these decisions, and I am not morally or legally culpable, is what people told themselves. And that's how people get through doing atrocious things. They dissociate themselves. It's not my decision. Well, that is a problem. And it's a psychological protective device, but it's also very dangerous. And so what these 6 people were trying to do with this video, what these representatives in the House and the senators were trying to do is make it clear, because these young people may not have heard that I'm just following orders or I was just following orders is not just a not helpful defense, but it's morally wrong. And guess what? You have the right and the obligation to say no. It is very difficult to live up to this because, of course, your leaders who are asking you to do things that are unlawful, either one, don't care that they are unlawful, or two, have not thought it through or have convinced themselves that it's fine, and you would suffer the short-term consequences of that. But that's why these leaders are saying, we have your back. Right? Now, again, everything they're saying is legal. To accuse them of sedition, of doing something unlawful. And again, we don't even need to talk about what sedition is quite yet. So that's what Donald Trump does first. And then there's a flurry of comments on his Truth Social page, right? He said other things, but then the worst thing I think he said was this. Hang them. So he responds, this is Donald Trump responding to the Washington Examiner's comment. So something the Washington Examiner said, and says, I'm sorry, let me say this differently. A person named P78 responded to the Washington Examiner newspaper and said, hang them. George Washington would. And Donald Trump shared that, endorsed that, and it's still up. Hang them like George Washington would. The reaction was swift yesterday, and this is why I want to say to Donald Trump, who does not watch my show, Donald Trump, quiet, piggy, zip it, quiet. You are ridiculous. But as much as I want to say something snarky like that, this creates a real target for these members of Congress and the Senate. So I want to share first what Alyssa Slotkin said last night on Chris Hayes. Again, she is she's the only senator that we have that's going forward because there's an election to fill Gary Peters' spot. So I guess Gary Peters is still my senator. But here's Alyssa Slotkin, who is a veteran because she spent time in intelligence of the CIA. And here is Alyssa, or Senator Slotkin, speaking with Chris Hayes about this threat.
Take that as a serious threat? Do you take that as jawboning? How do you understand that?
Well, look, I think we have to expect that, the Department of Justice is doing President Trump's bidding. They're focusing on the things he wants to focus on. So, I certainly wouldn't be shocked if they initiated an actual investigation. Now, I never said defy a court order. If anything, the Trump administration is the one who has to make sure they adhere to court orders, including today, where they said that the deployment of the National Guard to Washington, D.C. is illegal and they need to get out by mid-December. So, I think this is a tactic. This is a way that they distract from the conversations they don't want to be having. And this is a really bad week for Donald Trump on the Epstein files. He's been fighting this for a long time, and now it's out, and he doesn't want to be talking about that. He'd rather put this on other folks. And the Department of Justice, we've had the removal of so many of our Department of Justice lawyers and so many of Trump loyalists put in there that, I don't think anyone's missing that he's moving the Department of Justice in the direction of the ways that he wants and not the ways that the American public need.
Okay. This is bad, right? It's bad. And I want to share with you another example of a response to this. And that is, of course, Mike Johnson. Puppet Johnson. Let's play this.
What I read was he was defining the crime of sedition. Okay, I don't. That is a factual statement. But obviously, attorneys have to parse the language and determine all that. What I will say unequivocally, that was a wildly inappropriate thing for so-called leaders in Congress to do, to encourage young troops to disobey orders. Think of what the threat that is to our national security and what it means to our institutions. We have got to raise the bar in Congress. This is out of control and is wildly inappropriate. And for a senator like Mark Kelly or any member of Congress in the House or Senate to be engaged in that kind of talk is to me just so beyond the pale.
Yeah, he said lawyers were going to have to parse that. Do you want me to parse that for you? I've got some more comments from you. But let me, like Hakeem Jeffries and others responding on this, and also Carolyn Leavitt. But let me just parse that for you. Again, this is not my area of law, but I can tell you what I know, and that there are basically different sedition statutes, right? There is the regular U.S. code that would apply to you, me, and most likely these members of Congress. And then, of course, there is the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Now, let's talk about the regular sedition statute. It is whatever the crime of sedition is, which we can talk about. It is not punishable by death in the regular U.S. criminal code. So let me share that screen with you. Again, this is not my area of law, but I am confirming this for you with these statutes. If you are disagreeing with me, that's fine. I'm just showing you this law. So this is 18 U.S.C. 2384, seditious conspiracy. And this applies to ordinary people. And let me tell you what it's defined as. If two or more persons, okay, so in theory, this is two or more persons, in any state or territory, or in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, conspire to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force to seize, take, or possess any property in the U.S., contrary to the authority thereof, they shall each be fined or imprisoned no more than 20 years or both. Okay, so even if you look at this statute, what is possible that they are doing? I mean, they're not conspiring to overthrow the government. I don't hear saying that you have to follow the laws doing that. They're not using force to overthrow anything. There is no force. These are words. I'm not seeing it. Now, of course, I do want to say to you, I haven't read the cases interpreting this, but it strikes me that the fact that they made this video, they are not covered under that particular statute. Now, you may say, what about the speech and debate clause that protects all members of Congress, including the Senate, that they cannot be held accountable for things that they say kind of on the floor of the House or Senate? Sure, but that's not what this is. But still, bottom line, I'm not seeing that statute applying to them. But of course, there is then the Code of Military Justice. This, again, totally not my area. Title 18 that I just showed you is my area because of federal white-collar crime that I teach. But let's look at the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Okay, so with this is 10 U.S.C. 894, Article 94, mutiny or sedition. And it says, any person subject to this chapter with intent to usurp or override lawful military authority refuses, in concert with another person, to obey orders or otherwise do his duty, or creates violence or disturbance, is guilty of mutiny. Okay, so that's an example. With intent, it has to be with intent with intent to cause the overthrow or lawful civil authority, or destruction of lawful authority, creates in concert with another person a revolt, violence, or other disturbance against that authority. And then there's other stuff about failing to suppress a mutiny. So what he is pointing to is that any person subject to this chapter, let's see who is subject to the chapter, with intent to usurp or override lawful military authority, refuses to obey orders. Okay, so that would mean, and by the way, a person who is found guilty of attempted mutiny, sedition, or failure to suppress shall be punished by death, or shall such other punishment as court-martial will direct. Well, the important thing here in this language is it only applies to someone subject to this chapter. So it would be someone, let's say, in the military, right, with intent to override or usurp lawful military authority, refuses to follow orders. Okay, let me back up. how I read this statute as a law professor but non-expert is, if a member of the military agrees with somebody else, anyone else, it doesn't have to be someone in the military, anyone, right? Anyone else has this intention to ignore or not follow an unlawful order, a lawful order, they could be subject to death. What is so clear is in the video, they said, you don't have to follow unlawful orders. Of course, first of all, what they're saying, the members of the House and Senate, even if they were covered by the chapter, right? Even if it applied to them, this is not what they are doing, right? So that is, that's not what Donald Trump is concerned about. He's concerned about the members of the military making a decision that they think what he's asking them to do is unlawful. And how would they know that, right? He doesn't want people to stop following all orders. That's what most commanders in chief would be concerned about. But in particular, creating doubt about the legitimacy and the legality of what Pete Hegseth is asking people to do. So I'm not defending Donald Trump, but it's understandable what he's worried about. But nevertheless, nothing these senators and House members said in that video even gets close to sedition, either statute, and certainly absolutely isn't punishable by death. Okay, so I just want to let you know that Mike Johnson is a fool and a puppet, because John Thune over in the Senate Majority Leader distanced himself. So now I want to share with you Jason Crow, who was one of the people on that video, a veteran who is now, all of these people now have asked, because Donald Trump has put a target on their back and said, agreed that they should be killed, murdered. They need security. They need extra security for themselves and their family. I want to play for you on Cassie Hunt's show, Jason Crow.
To approve the additional House security?
I'm not sure about that, actually. I've spoken with Hakeem Jeffries. Speaker Johnson has not reached out to me, which frankly is very unfortunate that the Speaker of the House wouldn't respond to this and take this very seriously. In fact, he seems to have joined the chorus of disinformation and propaganda by the President and Caroline Leavitt, which is once again beyond disappointing to see the failure of leadership on the Republican side.
All right, Congressman Jason Crow, thanks.
So key question. What if Mike Johnson refuses it? Their extra security, that's a question. But Jason Crow also got into the fact of what a coward Mike Johnson is. I'd like to share with you what House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, had to say about this. I think he did a great job. Let's listen to his response to these death threats.
It's extraordinary to me. We had patriotic members of the House and the Senate have their lives threatened by Donald Trump in the most unhinged, unacceptable, unconscionable, and un-American way. Disgusting and dangerous what Donald Trump has said in accusing patriotic members of Congress and the Senate who served this country well of treason and suggesting they should be killed. That's disgusting. But we, of course, have come to expect this from Donald Trump. What's extraordinary to me is that Mike Johnson doesn't even have the decency to distance himself from Donald Trump's death threats leveled at patriotic members of Congress. Even John Thune found it reasonable for him to say he disagrees with what Donald Trump accused members of Congress of doing earlier today. Even John Thune had the decency to distance himself from Donald Trump's remarks. But Mike Johnson couldn't say a thing about it. And his silence speaks volumes.
It sure does. And did you notice that Hakeem Jeffries referred to treason now? That's a totally different legal offense in the U.S. found in our Constitution. Trump didn't talk about treason, but that's in Article 3, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. I feel like, and we also have, we also have the treason in the U.S. Code. So that's right before the sedition statute, 18 U.S.C. 2381. And that is punishable by death. But again, that involves levying war against the U.S. or giving aid and comfort to our enemies. Not even close. Okay. So whether it is thought to be treason, defined by the Constitution and statute, whether it's arguably seditious conspiracy by Title 18, whether it's the Uniform Code of Military Justice, supposed to be sedition or mutiny, that's not what is happening here. And I want to say quiet, Piggy. Now, speaking of quiet, Piggy, I feel like you deserve the original Quiet Piggy from a few days ago, which was on Air Force One. Let's play the original, and I got a few, and then I have Carolyn Leavitt responding to that. Here we go.
There's nothing incriminating in the file, sir. Quiet, Venezuela, sir.
Quiet, Piggy. I think she was asking about the Epstein files. Let's play that again. Let's hear what she asked.
If there's nothing incriminating in the file, Venezuela, sir. Quiet.
Yeah. She was saying, this reporter, if there is nothing incriminating in the Epstein files, then as that woman asked that question, another woman was asking about Venezuela. So apparently the reporter, I don't think it even really matters what her name is. He's attacked her before. I don't need to draw more attention to her with that insult, but I want to own that insult. Quiet Piggy to him. Now, why does he not want to hear about the Epstein files? Now, this question was asked of Donald Trump before I think right before he gave the blessing or the command that the House should support the Epstein Files Transparency Act. But let's talk about how Carolyn Leavitt responds to that when she's confronted with how inappropriate, rude, and frankly sexist, even if they didn't say that, it is.
What did the president mean when he called reporter Piggy?
Look, the president is very frank and honest with everyone in this room. You've all seen it yourself. You've all experienced it yourselves. And I think it's one of the many reasons that the American people reelected this president.
Frank and honest? I mean, human beings are not farm animals. And as much as I adore pigs, we also must understand that when you refer to a human being and reference them as a farm animal, when they are not a farm animal, that's not frank and truthful. It's actually inaccurate and insulting. Let's continue with her bullshit.
Because of his frankness, and he calls out fake news when he sees it. He gets frustrated with reporters when you lie about him, when you spread fake news about him and his administration. But he also is the most transparent.
Okay. He gets frustrated when you spread fake news. All she did is ask a question if there's nothing incriminating in the files. Yeah, a lot of us get frustrated when we are asked questions and when our authority is challenged and we don't get everything we want. But if you're not a monster and you want to be a social creature in harmony with others, you don't decide to dominate, control, and crush any questioning of your authority. But Donald Trump is a monster. And I think the only pleasure he gets out of life is hurting people. Remember, when he was a child, a small child, he threw rocks at a baby that was like outside in a little high chair or child play seat, threw rocks at a baby. He is really messed up. And in fact, as Carolyn Leavitt did not mention at that moment, he sat next to one of the most famous journalist murderers in the world and continually praised him. Yes, MBS, right? Mohammed bin Salman, and was really kind of happy about and justifying the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. Some people didn't like him. Donald Trump's standard is pretty low for wanting people murdered, right? Okie doke, and especially the press. So, you know what? Quiet Piggy is probably just a little bit better or a lot better than calling for some your opponents to be murdered. Okay, but I have more for you. Speaking of Leavitt, she was asked about Donald Trump's threats against the senators and members of Congress who made that video, encouraging members of our armed forces to follow the law. And here's what she said.
Saying to 1.3 million active duty service members not to defy the chain of command, not to follow lawful orders.
She is lying. Let's continue.
Single
can refuse an illegal order, which
but
is
they're suggesting, Nancy, that the president has given illegal orders, which he has not. Every single order that is given to this United States military by this commander-in-chief and through this chain of command, through the Secretary of War, is lawful. And the courts have proven that. This administration has an unparalleled record at the Supreme Court because
the courts have proven that? Really? Really? What order from the military has been challenged in court that the Supreme Court has proven is lawful? What? I'm waiting for her to talk about that case. Let's continue.
We are following the laws. We don't defy court orders. We do things by the books. And to suggest and encourage that active duty service members defy the chain of command is a very dangerous thing for sitting members of Congress.
You know what, Carolyn? Whatever. No one's going to remember who you are. You know what? You're doing what you do. You seem happy about it. I'm glad that when I even listen to you, it makes me nauseous. And speaking of being made nauseous, our very, very oily Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, was back on his BS. And you never guess what he's doing. Remember, people are so focused on their pocketbooks, right? And he is trying to explain to the listening public how much a war in Venezuela could benefit them because gas prices would go down or the price of oil will go down. And I got to tell you, he is looking so oily in this video that I just feel like if they turned up the Klieg lights or whatever they have in the studios, there are lots of lights in studios, right? If they just turn them up a bit and kind of dial down the thermostat, I think we would see his face like melting like wax. I would enjoy that. Oh, just to let you know, I'm not an expert on melting wax. Why am I being like this today? I think someone asked me a question the other day, what kinds of things you talk about on your show, and said, do you talk about things you're not an legal expert about? And I thought, I do this show as kind of law, money, and snark in my, not my day job as a law professor. But I think it is important, in fairness to this person, that when I'm talking about legal issues, I make it clear if it's my area or if it's not. I'm not sure that if I'm talking about ordinary commentary that I need to let you know, but I'm being a little snarky and saying I don't know anything about the temperature of melting wax. And I actually don't know if his face, as a matter of, empirical fact, would melt. But let's come into my world of magical realism, where I see his face just melting into a pool inside of his, just retreating inside of his suit like a scared turtle. Can we do that? And again, I'm not an expert on turtles, but I am a big fan of a tortoise named Tank. Okay, let's play this.
Very confident about job growth and the momentum that we've got for next year. And I think what it is going to take is for people to see, the president has done, I keep saying peace deals, trade deals, and tax deals. So we did the one big beautiful bill in July, and we are seeing a CapEx boom thanks to that. Historically, capital expenditure is always followed by job growth. The peace deals, we are seeing a peace dividend from that, and I think there's a very, very good chance that if something happens with Russia, Ukraine, if something happens down in Venezuela, that we could really see oil prices go down even more. And oil and gasoline prices are down substantially under President Trump. And that is really the key to affordability, is lower energy. So energy.
See what I mean? I can't even listen to the words he says anymore. I am like watching a Peanuts, like a Charlie Brown Peanuts animation where the teacher is talking and it's like, you know what I mean, right? That's what it sounds like. Like I can't even hear the adults in the room when they're full of BS. Okay. So let's talk about Epstein a little bit more. Over my day off yesterday when I was traveling, we saw that Lawrence Summers, voluntarily decided not to teach the rest of his 2 courses this semester. I wonder how voluntary that was. I'm sure he had some pretty intense conversations with the president of Harvard University. And I will say, I have never called the president's office before of any university, even one in which I teach. But in this instance, I decided that it was when I had learned about that Harvard Crimson reveal that Larry Summers had, according to his own communications with Epstein, while he was married, been trying to get a grad student. Actually, she was a junior professor who was seeking his help as his mentoring, trying to get her quote unquote horizontal, understanding that he would not be able to do that on the basis of his own, Adonis persona. I don't know. And that he would have to use some sort of unstated coercion, like implying that the only way she would have access to him and his networks would be if she would succumb to those advances. That is the implication of those communications. And I found them deeply concerning, that there may be more about his behavior towards students at the university. Moreover, his insult to women's intelligence, and it goes on and on. I would not want to be in his classes. And it turns out yesterday, he decided, or the day before, I guess it would have been yesterday, that he decided, or the night before, so I couldn't include it in the show, that he wouldn't be participating. But I have never called the president's office, and I did. I called Alan Garber's office and the president of Harvard University and spoke with his assistant and left a message when I learned about this. Also, that he referred to this woman who is Asian American as Peril, as in yellow peril, which has obviously evokes incredible racism. She's a Chinese American. She's of Chinese descent. Her parents were Chinese nationals, and she is a U.S. citizen. But nevertheless, the implication is that expression yellow peril was used to support the Chinese Exclusion Act. At any rate, the whole thing was sexist and racist and yuck. And so I did call and say that I wanted the Alan Garber, the president of Harvard, to make some sort of statement indicating that he was aware of the allegations against Professor Summers, and that I also wanted them to look into, to further investigate, to see whether either this behavior was in violation of university policy or anything else might have been, right? And that I expressed concern for the students of the university. I did that. If I made that phone call, I gotta guess other people did. I don't usually get involved in things like that directly with that. So I will say it's not the first time I have done something to stop Larry Summers. Back in 2013, when his name was in the ring for potential chair of the Federal Reserve, when Obama was president, Ben Bernanke was no longer going to be Fed chair, and I think it was up to Janet Yellen, or down to either Janet Yellen or Larry Summers. And I was extremely opposed to Larry Summers because when he was Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton, he was one of the people largely responsible for what came down next, which was setting in motion the what led to the global financial crisis of 2008, and sidelining the women like Brooksley Born of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, who were warning about the dangers in the market. Okay, so I have not been a fan of his, and I thought he'd be a very bad Fed chair. And so back then in 2013, I helped organize a letter with law professors and economists that we wrote, and we sent to President Obama. And I think it was mentioned at one point in Politico. Anyway, it was something I was very proud of doing. And of course, between that pressure and much other pressure, it wasn't just us, he withdrew his name from consideration, and Yellen became Fed chair. At any rate, this is getting me to where I'm going with this. Donald Trump seems to be confused, as do some of his supporters, that somehow any of us would be upset, whatever political affiliation we have, if the result of whatever comes out in the Epstein files first focuses on people like Larry Summers. Because, of course, there is this sense that Donald Trump will use the redaction power to hide him and maybe his friends' names. I don't think that's good. There still has to be a redaction file, and I'm sure eventually this will come out. But let me tell you, we would be lucky to be rid of Larry Summers, because he is hugely still an influence, or he was still a player and an influencer of people inside the Beltway. People still trust his judgment. He is arrogant. He has failed. And also, when he was president of Harvard and was forced to step down because of some sexism allegations, when he left at a time that there was a major transaction inside of this, like the Harvard, there was a Harvard fund. What was this? It's the Harvard endowment that didn't get unwound. Well, anyway, I don't want to fully blame that on him without having my citations. This is something I think I mentioned in other people's houses. I don't want to have the full criticizing for him for that. But let me just say, we'd be lucky to be having him sidelined in his retirement. And if there are criminal allegations against him, I don't really care. I hope that everyone is held accountable. Now, the Harvard Crimson is still reporting on Larry Summers. And yesterday, there was a really interesting story about how his current wife, Alyssa New, the English professor, a couple things that are being reported. One key thing is that when they got married and were going on their honeymoon, guess where they stopped over? On Epstein's Island. I think they even took his plane. And the response I think they gave the Crimson, or his spokesperson gave the Crimson, was they weren't even there for a whole day. I don't know how you measure a day. Is that 24 hours? I can't imagine that they got a plane to where it stopped first in Charlotte Amalie on St. Thomas, the island, and then took the plane, Epstein's plane, to his island. I can't imagine they got dropped there and then said, "Thanks, Jeff, it looks pretty." Then hopped on that same plane to go back to Charlotte Amalie and then on to wherever they were going. You really think they said, "Oh, like this, looked around, oh, nice." You don't think they came in to have a cup of coffee or adult beverage? Come on. Now, does it mean that Larry Summers at that time and his wife saw what we've heard happens there? I don't know what they saw or didn't see, but I do know that by the time Epstein was arrested, Larry Summers really knew, or should have known, what was going on the day arrested. I mean, most recently, he was literally emailing with the guy who was his quote unquote wingman in this effort to coerce someone into a sexual relationship, to the day before, at least the day before he was arrested. This is the report. So this brings me to this clip that I'm going to show you from Chris Murphy, the senator of Connecticut. This is the right answer to this question that was posed to him on CNN.
Investigations into Democrats who had been named in the files that were released by the Epstein estate. One of the things the president did say, and again, he signed it overnight, no signing ceremony, no TV cameras, no nothing, but he did put out a Truth Social release where he noted that Democrats have been mentioned, again, in what has been released so far. What if there are more names connected to the Democratic Party that come out as a result of this?
So what? I mean, yeah, I'm sure that there are Democrats in those files. There are Republicans in those files. There are, Wall Street executives who have no political affiliation. What we want is to understand who was involved in this. I mean, I don't think the president is so selfless that he was, stopping the release of these files for so long because he was protecting his friends. I just think it stands to reason that he's very much connected to this scandal. And we may or may not know the extent of that, because it could be that the president is going to try to find a way to redact any information connected to him from those files. But to me, it just doesn't matter the political affiliation. The law is the law. They need to release the files.
Exactly. Not even with any kind of hesitation. This is about the victims. It's about accountability. Enough of the cover-up. Now, speaking of this, it's always going to help to follow the money. And I imagine that you heard about the reporting or the report that Ron Wyden he's calling it a bombshell report. This report that he has released about the banking relationships, right? The House Oversight Committee is seeking more, by subpoena, more bank records. And Ron Wyden himself has issued this report, which I would like to share with you, arguing that, or asking whether JP Morgan Chase deliberately underreported more than $1 billion in suspicious transactions. And so this report, I am going to share this. I think what I'm going to do is drop first in the chat for you the New York Times article that references it. And then I'm going to bring for you up on stage the actual report so you can look at what I'm looking at. Okay, so here we go. This is what Wyden has here. I think you can see this. I'm just hoping. Okay, and it's going to be hard to see all of it, but I want you to see the parts that's key here. This is from November 19th. And we learned about it I think we learned about it yesterday. Yesterday is when I learned about it. So this is a letter to Senator Wyden from the Committee on Finance, and this is telling him. Sorry. This is to Ron Wyden because he is chair of this Senate Committee on Finance from his senior investigator. This is a report based on what was found out from the searching through records that were released concerning specifically JP Morgan Chase. And the key thing you can see here is that JP Morgan Chase data shows that between 2002 and 2016. And I want to get rid of this for a second because I think if I do instead Ron Wyden's actual feed here, we will be better off because you will be able to see. Let me just do that. You'll be able to see Ron Wyden has these pictures that I think you will find more. Here, hold on one second. Let me show this because he shares. Okay, let me do this. Yeah. Okay, so this is, if you're looking at this here, this is Ron Wyden on his Blue Sky social page. And actually, this is on his Twitter page that I'm pulling up, but you can still go ahead and see this. Let me pull this up like this. So here is Ron Wyden showing that even though JP Morgan Chase knew about suspicious transactions involving Epstein's various accounts, you can look on the left, which is this little skinny red line, that they only, before 2019, throughout the course of their entire relationship with Epstein, they only reported $4.3 million in suspicious transactions. But when he was arrested and then died in prison, they reported $1.28 billion. And let me just be clear, these were transactions that had taken place before then. It wasn't like they all happened when this man died. Okay, so what do we know about this? What we know about this report is that he is arguing that this went all the way to the top, that JP Morgan Chase referred to Jeff Epstein as, quote unquote, their wall of cash. He was part of that wall of cash. It was an elite group of customers. Also, that a top executive at the bank was in constant contact with him. Her name was Mary Erdos. That they even maintained, well, the reason why they maintained the relationship with Epstein wasn't just how much money he had, but because of his connections. And as you may know, Epstein had tremendous influence over someone named Leon Black. And Leon Black has now felt the effects of this in his own personal life, but they loved having Epstein as someone who could help the bank bring in money and transactions. What we also found out in this report, which is a blockbuster report, is that the former CEO of private banking, so this is a division of JP Morgan Chase. Private banking is for the very, well, it's not always the very wealthy. Private banking encompasses anyone of even, I would say, upper middle class means, and also up to these billionaires people. And the former CEO of private banking, a guy named John Duffy, according to this report from Ron Wyden, Senator Wyden's investigator, I mean, you're not going to believe this. I'm quoting this report that he counseled this JP Morgan Chase private banking CEO, John Duffy, counseled Jeff Epstein on how to execute suspicious cash withdrawals to avoid reporting requirements. My friend, I am an expert in money laundering, or I don't money launder. This is an allegation of criminality. Of course, the problem being the statute of limitations probably likely ran on that. Now, in addition, there are emails that have been discovered showing how the people inside JP Morgan Chase withheld information on the suspicious activity to the compliance department. And it goes also the case that Epstein, his accountant, what this report says, a guy named Harry Beller, was an integral part of Epstein's financial operation and his links to sex trafficking crimes. This is what the report says. So they want to investigate this former accountant. Again, follow the money. And finally, one more key finding was that Jeff Epstein paid Ghislaine Maxwell at least $25 million, including a one-time payment of $19 million from his accounts. This stuff is, it's unbelievable. The dates so keep in mind, they decide to report these suspicious transactions, right? Close to $1.3 billion, over $1 billion in suspicious transactions. They report, and in 2019, all of this, in 2019, the first date is August 13th, and then September 26th. All of that, these are reported, but the transaction dates go from 2003 to 2019. 2003 to 2019. You may ask yourself, when was the last time they reported any suspicious transactions on Epstein? It was 2016, but it was $152,000, dollars. This stuff it's a disgrace. It's an utter disgrace. So this is a report that you all, I think I can pull up the full link to the report for you guys. I am going to drop it in the chat for anyone who wants to read it. It's a short report. It is really readable. It has a cover memo, and the whole thing altogether it's essentially a letter of 14 pages with a lot of really good details. So I encourage you to read it. We are going to be hearing a lot more about the follow the money efforts with this. And it's so important that we keep our eyes on this, and that everything else Donald Trump is trying to do, quiet Piggy. Now, it is time for Crazy Town. Now, you may notice I haven't been doing Crazy Town in a while, but I am back on it. Now, one thing that's tricky with this is, for some reason, the music I have been using forever for Crazy Town is now suddenly getting flagged that I'm not supposed to use it. Okay, so do I need it? No. You know what we can use for Crazy Town? We have a lot of choices, but I'm thinking this is pretty damn good. I like that. Another option is, don't let me loose with these sound effects, guys. I also have, I've got a boo. So yeah, I got a lot. So for now, we're going to do Crazy Town with a lot more. I can't even begin to tell you how crazy this Crazy Town is. And it involves none other than Pete Hegseth. I don't even know how to tell you this other than to share with you what the MidasTouch.com Blue Sky account had to say, because they have this, my friends, with some really good images. So apparently, Pete Hegseth accidentally had our military invade Mexico and say, oops, our bad. We didn't know the maps. I kid you not. Let me show you this. I'm stunned. So here we go. It's pretty funny, I guess. I want to blow this up a little bit. Okay, I think this is, yay, it's filling the screen. So this is Midas Touch. What the hell? The U.S. accidentally invaded Mexico on Monday. storming a beach and planting Department of Defense, quote, restricted area, end quote, signs in English and Spanish, claiming the land for, quote unquote, the commander, and triggered a standoff with armed Mexican security forces, all because Trump's government can't even identify a border on a map. What I love about what they've done here is, of course, this is one of these old photos of Pete Hegseth on a drinking binge. And on the right, we have what's going on this beach, and then the warning sign. Now it says, according to Mice Touch, and obviously this is reported in the Daily Mail and CBS News. I'll show you this in a second. Mexico tore the signs out. The Pentagon admitted the troops miscalculated the boundary. And this isn't great. The Pentagon added that contractors would coordinate the appropriate agencies to avoid confusion in the future. And I swear to you, warning signs appear on Mexican beach declaring area restricted by U.S. as Mexico rejects Trump's offer to strike cartels. Not a great situation. It's kind of crazy. It really is. Okay, guys, I'm trying to mix it up. Thanks so much for watching. Have a fabulous, fabulous weekend. I'm sure there's going to be some excitement. And I hope as you're preparing for Thanksgiving, and you know this, if you're planning to do a deep fried turkey, make sure you follow whatever the flippant instructions are in terms of making it be fully defrosted before you drop it in hot oil. And make sure if you are doing this, that you don't have your big boiling cauldron of oil inside any building, or near anything flammable, or near children, or near anybody. Maybe don't do it. But again, if you must deep fry a turkey, oh my God, I'm going to be sending you my Thanksgiving warnings of turkey fails on Wednesday or Thursday. But anyway, very excited about Thanksgiving next week. Enjoy your weekend as you prepare your plans, whether it is a vegan or a gluten-free or a bird-free or a classic Thanksgiving. I'm so glad that everyone is going to be coming together. We have a lot to be thankful for. I swear to you, it will get better from here.
Hello, prison mates. It's the Jen Taub Show. Well, welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There is hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Jen Taub Show.